Helen and John Dunlop own Kakariki Olives, grown at their Redwood Valley Grove at Richmond near Nelson. The Dunlops bought the 11-hectare block in 1999, clearing the land and planting 3,000 olive trees.
We were in the building industry for a number of years, and 22 years ago we sold our business in Australia, came back to New Zealand and bought a farm in the Sherry River, which is just south of Nelson. That almost wore us out, so we sold that and thought an olive grove would be a much less stressful way to end out the rest of our lives. When we first started out looking for a property to grow olives on, the real estate industry obviously have no idea of what constitutes a good olive growing region. Of course, every area of every piece of bare land throughout the province was perfect for growing grapes or olives in actual fact, and you know, the frost proneness of olives doesn't make every block a good block, and our property here is a good example. You know, parts of it are elevated and make a good olive growing area. 30% of it's in low-lying area, very frost prone, and it makes it very marginal as far as growing good ripe olives. The economy of scale is an important factor. If you can't get that, it becomes economically unviable, you know, by the time you pay your harvesting and pressing costs. If you're only getting 10 kilos of olives off a tree and a 10% yield, that's probably about where the threshold of being economic is. So anything less than that, you're running at a loss. The future of olive oil in the long term is really good. The product is fantastic. As the owner of Lot 8 said recently at the Olive Conference, she doesn't think she's ever tasted a bad New Zealand olive oil, and I think she's 100% correct. And if you've got a fantastic product, it's only a matter of time before the market understands this. At the moment, it's perceived that the best extra virgin olive oils come out of Italy. That's slowly changing. The results of our oils in the international competitions bear this out, and once the world market recovers from its current recession and gets back into eating the good things in life, well then it won't take long for our oils to be accepted as being as good as if not better than the extra virgin oils coming out of Europe. Once that happens, those niche markets will be found. Every harvest season seems to be a difficult harvest season. This year we had a much drier, colder summer, and the harvest is much later, up to 5 weeks later, and that has its challenges in the South Island, you know, particularly with the frost. Basically it freezes the olive and it causes to start fermenting straight away, and once it starts to ferment it introduces all sorts of undesirable flavours into the oil. You look at the long-range forecast really, and if you can see an intense high coming with the associated frosts, then you just have to draw a line in the sand and say, right, frost-prone stuff has to come off before that date, and we'll just take whatever we can get out of that, and we'll try and, you know, leave the rest of the crop to reach its optimum ripeness and try and keep our margins intact with that. With the lack of ripeness, the shaker can tend to leave a lot of fruit on the trees. They adhere to the tree much harder, you know, when they're not ripe. Lack of moisture, the weight of the fruits is not there to help get them off the tree. Having this machine here is a godsend. You know, we're both not far off the retirement age, and the old method of getting it off with the handheld shakers and the mats and harvesting 3,000 trees, it was a long 6 weeks, especially if you're the guy on the end of the shaker, which the tall guy usually got that job, so I couldn't miss there. And this machine, it's all done bulk. The press provides the bulk containers. From the point of view of the physical labour, it's just much easier. You can't have too much wood on your trees. 3 or 4 litres maximum, no forks in the branches. The forces generated by the machine tend to go upwards, and if you divide those forces by having too much timber, the effectiveness of getting the fruit off is definitely affected. Our main variety is Frantoio. We've got 1,300 trees. We've got 700 Licino and 500 Minerva, which is a clone of Licino, supposedly frost resistant. And interspersed with this, we've got 10% of Pendolino as a pollinator. The oils that they produce are, generally speaking, more robust. They've got that nice peppery aftertaste. Nelson and much of New Zealand is pretty much on the same latitude as Tuscany, so if they do well there, they're going to do well here. Olives like a free draining soil, they don't like wet feet, and the trees, I think, once they get a bit of size to them, they seem to be able to cope with a bit more of the wet feet syndrome. Our fertiliser policy, at the moment, we've been using the Ravensdown olive tree mix, which has got all the trace elements we require. We do fertiliser tests every 3 years, and our soils, generally speaking, are at the bottom end of the optimum level, so we just sort of scrape in each time with the trace elements. Our pH is good. We inherited a pH of 7, and we're managing to keep that up. We had a third application of lime last year at a tonne to the acre, and that seems to be maintaining the pH level in the high 6s, close to 7. No irrigation here. We're on the Muteri clays, and once the trees get down on that, there's moisture always available. You know, you can dig a hole here in the middle of summer, and you'll be struggling to get down, but as soon as you hit that clay, it's nice and moist.
Tasman Bay Olives supply the harvesting machine to the Dunlops and also press and process their fruit. Roger Armstrong explains.
We're contracting processing and harvesting around the Nelson district. We've got a Pegaso 500, which is an Italian machine. We've had it here for 10 years, processing out of it. And originally the property here was apples, so we made that change back in 2000. And we'd already started on the olive side of the business at that stage and grown that on. Last season we processed about 190 tonnes of fruit. Probably 3/4 of that was contract work. This year we're probably down to half of that. Just reflects the season we've got. And I'm convinced Nelson's certainly got a niche because we generally don't irrigate in the area. We don't normally have to worry too much about fungal issues, whereas up north that's more of an issue. And our climate's fairly even compared to other parts of the country. So I think Nelson's got a good future.
Olives New Zealand is a group of growers. Generally speaking, they represent the regions, and they've tried to keep a balance from that point of view. At the moment, it's a group of people that are struggling with an organisation that's cash-strapped. This is being addressed. Drop of membership is being a problem as a result of the industry being fractured mainly through political aspects, but the reason I've gone onto the committee is I can see the only way forward is as a unified organisation, and I would like to see that the Olives New Zealand become an all-encompassing group, if you like, that represents the whole of the olive industry. And I think that ultimately that's the only way that we can go ahead. Without the levy that was voted out in a recent referendum, I don't think we can go forward. The numbers aren't there without it. There's other issues that have to be addressed. You have the bigger groves subsidising the smaller groves. That sort of mental outlook has to be addressed. But the bottom line is that all the groups in New Zealand are producing a top product, and I think that as a unified body, that's going to give us the best chance on both the local and the international market.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.